So
Cool.
if you are watching, good evening and thank you. Please do say hello. Feel free to join in the comments at any point. So this is the second episode of 5 at Phoenix. I had Helen Jewell with me last week, and this week I have the wonderful Nick Elston with me.
Hey!
So Nick, give us a little bit of an intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So thank you very much, first and foremost. Be polite always. So my name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. Yeah, it's a job. It's been my job since 2016 as a pro speaker. I'm also a speaking coach, so I help people to deliver their message with power and clarity and emotion.
Beautiful. So communication, also right up your street. So Helen, who was with us last week, is a facilitator. So also very kind of job focused around communication. So thank you for joining us this week. So have you got 5 questions for me?
I have got 5 questions for you.
Are you prepared with a piece of paper? And
I did give you a heads up that I had a week off last week, so I've recharged, so I'm actually got fully restored knowledge. So communication being the theme.
Yeah.
And I think communication for me, as you know, I'm a big passionate believer in like emotional storytelling, and it's something that that really kind of I admired about you to start with. When we first met at the theatre in Bath, Bath to those outside the area, speaking at the same event going back years ago now. When we first met, I was really bowled over by your story. So question number 1, how do you effectively communicate your message when you deliver talks to your audiences? How do you make them feel that experience without?
So when I'm telling my story as opposed to sort of that general presentation.
Yes.
I think it's
how do you take them on that journey?
Challenge for me. So yeah, I think the challenge for me, and I think with anybody who's telling their story, and it can have those emotional elements to it, is how to take people on the journey for them to experience the emotion that you felt while you were on that journey, but not to put them through the emotion themselves. So I guess you kind of want to make it for them feel like you're telling the story, not putting them in it. And I think that's kind of over the years of seeing different people speak, because everybody loves the human story, don't they? Everybody loves somebody with a story to tell, and especially when there's a happy ending. But I've heard certain speakers, that go into a huge amount of detail, and from my point of view was too descriptive, that people get then caught up on the pain or the emotion as opposed to the kind of the story within the story, or the message you want people to get from your story. So I think from my point of view, I always start with, I'm here, I'm happy, there's a happy ending. So whatever I tell you in the next 20 minutes, half an hour, know that we get through it and everything's okay, so that they understand that this isn't going to be half an hour of pain and trauma coming their way, that there's a happy ending. And also not spending too long on particular touch points of the story, of being able to kind of move through it quickly. I think the emotion is important, but I don't think people need to experience the emotion. They'll relate to it as you tell it. So you don't need to go into lots of detail for people to be able to build the picture in their mind. And for me, the important thing is that they focus on the message and the key messages I want to get across, rather than how I felt at the time, although that's part of it. So I think that's the balance of not getting too much in the drama, but enough so that they can see the story and that they can kind of picture it in their minds. I tend to have photographs. I tend to use those images, and then for me, then I don't need to go into a huge amount of detail to build the picture, because they can see the picture behind me. And that also keeps me on track and helps me to keep my story in the right order, because it's a lot of years to cover, and you've got to make sure that you cover them in the right order and don't get them mixed around. So I think from my point of view in that storytelling, it's building the picture, but not, you don't have to put them there in that situation for them to understand and take away the key message. Is that what you meant? Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It leads nicely into the second question, but I think it's just on this part, I think you're probably one of the best examples I've seen of somebody who also speaks about kind of an emotional journey, of a story that you can roll out your story to an audience without being owned by your story. And I'll be the first to admit I can walk the tightrope a little bit sometimes. And then, as you say, you see people go completely the other way and just kind of like, but I guess with that comes some form of kind of selective choice over what you decide to share with an audience. And I know from obviously being mates first and foremost, but from other kind of events that we've both spoken at, you speak at universities, you speak at different ages, different kind of demographics. Does your message change, or is it the delivery of your message changes?
Both. Both changes. I think when you know who's in the room and also what message they want you to pass over to the room, so quite often, dependent on who you're going to speak to, the people who are organising it will have a particular theme in mind, or they might be working on something as a group that they feel that your story can help with and contribute to. So I think that quite often makes a bit of a difference in certain parts of the story that you spend a little bit more time on, to help get those messages across. I think the style changes dependent on the audience. I've told parts of my story to teenagers, for the girl power kind of this girl can type angle, and so what you would tell them, there's still, every part of that story is still really important, because we're educating our young people into potentially things that they may experience in their future. So it's got to be told, but it's telling it in a way that is information sharing without that. We don't need them to fear something that may or may not happen. What we want to do is give that information of, okay, this is how you can manage it, or this is how you can, this is not, nothing is permanent. Things can change and things can move on. And so quite often when I'm telling my story, even if there's people in the room who they might not have experienced anything like it, but certain things that I'm talking about will resonate with them for something that they're working through at the moment. And I think that's part of not needing to go into a huge amount of detail, is that you can talk through. I guess for me, the focus of my story is not the situation I was in. It was more about what happened next. So I try to keep that focus on the positive action, the action bit of the story, rather than taking them back to the starting point, because it's not necessary. I can give them that in one sentence. I can paint the picture in one sentence, but the learning and the message and the bit that I feel I'm sharing, that purpose for sharing my story is all on the what happened next. So and again, those key messages will change dependent on who I'm talking to.
I think the line that really stands out for me when I've heard you talk lots of times, most recently when we were both speaking at Village Hotels, that you actually openly say, like, I don't have to walk you through the experience of going through this situation, but actually they don't want to hear that either. Really, is they want to hear the learnings, the experiences, and actually that being a catalyst for positive change. And that's exactly what you deliver. And I think you're quite right. I think you're actually quite right in that delivery. Because it does catch people. I mean, your story, not only is it kind of like multifaceted and goes across lots of different things, but you also throw in the strong woman stuff, the basketball stuff, and everything else. There's so much that people can pick and choose from, and I guarantee that people I know from my experience when I've heard you talk, like many times now, every time something different has jumped out at me, which is relevant to what's going on with me, and your audience are exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing, is the starting point was my starting point. That was the situation that I was in. However, if you strip the actual situation, what I was experiencing is actually very common. So the being stuck in a situation, the loss of confidence, the loss of self-esteem, living a life that I didn't want to live, making decisions that I didn't want to make, losing who I fundamentally felt who I was, losing sight of my values, not having my needs fulfilled, all of those things, essentially, if you talk about it's not about what the situation was, it was this is the situation I was in, here and here. And from my point of view, when I talk about those, that resonates with every single person in the room, because every single person in the room will have experienced something or one of those things at some point, if not at present, currently working through something along those lines. So why I was in that situation isn't necessarily relevant. It's how I felt, and then what I did next is the bit that I think that's the important bit for me, and in making sure that comes across, because that's the bit that people can relate to.
Yeah, and that's exactly the thing. It's the resilience element, the thrive element.
Yes.
That's such a big part of what you do. See, I get what you do now. I've always got what you do. So that leads on to the second question. Obviously, you're delivering a powerful message of that adversity to excitement kind of model, that theme, and also sharing personal but also professional stuff as well.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself when you are not just delivering, but also before and afterwards? Do you have like a pre-match and post-match routine to make sure energy stays right, or do you have to have downtime, or do you need to have pumped up music, or what? How do you manage your state, I guess is what I'm asking you.
I think before I go in, so I'm a big fan of music. So quite often when I'm traveling anywhere, the music is always in, and I will quite often have a more uplifting playlist just to kind of get my energy up before I go in. But sometimes I quite like to sit in the room for that little bit beforehand and gauge the room a little bit. And I know some people prefer not to do that. Some people prefer to wait outside. I quite like to spend some time in the room before I go in. So quite often I'll be hovering at the back just to get a bit of a feel for the energy in the room and the vibe of the room. And that also, I guess, for a couple of reasons really, is to see how engaged they already are, but also just to see what level of energy and engagement they're giving to the people that are in there before me, just so that I've got a bit of a baseline before I go in. So if they're quite a quiet group and they're not asking lots of questions, then I know that I can probably expect that as well. And so just to I think for me it's about matching those energy levels of the room when you go in. So I'm not there to motivate and get everybody lively, and that's not what I'm there to do. I'm there to talk through my story and hopefully give them some messages and hope, I guess, for some to take away. So for me it's about matching the energy of the room, and my story's like that anyway. So it is kind of, you can see people lift and drop as you go. So for me, just being in the room a little bit beforehand just helps me gauge where the baseline is, and also whether to start on a lively note or whether just to start on a more neutral note and then go from there. Afterwards, music again. But I also tend to hover a little bit afterwards in case anybody wants to come and talk to me privately, again, because of the nature of the story. Quite often people have questions but they don't want to ask in the room, so I always make sure that I leave my details, but quite often if it's appropriate for where I am, I'll hover a little bit to one side out in the corridor, and quite often people will come and have a conversation with me afterwards. So after that though, the earphones go in and the music goes on, and it'll tend to be something that for me is quite uplifting. It's that just to reset my own energy and not take away the energy from the room. So I know you do something similar, don't you? Although yours is country and western, and I can tell you mine is never.
So, some country. I'll be careful. It's not about losing your wife or your dog or something. It's but yeah, I do love country music, I must admit, as you know. But I think that actually walk-on music's really powerful, because we do this exercise and you work with me on my speaking academies, and lots of different things we work on together. And you know that I implement music a lot into my events. So what was your walk-on music last time we did this exercise? What did you choose?
So the last time I chose Jill Scott, Golden.
That's right, yeah, good tune.
Which I only first heard of a couple of years ago when I was doing my NLP coaching course, and it was somebody else's choice of song, which I have stolen. But the words, the lyrics and the music it resonates a lot for me. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
so,
and it's uplifting.
Just a little kind of soft in between music and country music. Try "The Champion" by Carrie Underwood. I think you'd really dig it. I'll send you the link afterwards. Yeah, check it out, guys.
Carrie Underwood as a singer, I like her vocals.
Yeah.
So okay, all right, I'll give it a go.
And you did admit one of the other post-match routines you've got is stitching up the next speaker after you, which was me in Village Hotels. But yeah, never be empty by Zoe, guys. That's all I'm going to say. So we're recording this during or kind of half lockdown that we're like during the pandemic year of 2020. In case this is being watched in the future. So third question, what's been your experience of lockdown? What's changed for you? How have you felt throughout that? And has it actually shifted ongoing? And also, has it changed your focus on how you would do things ongoing? I mean, that's personally and professionally, of course.
Well, it's changed a lot, as in a lot of the things that I would normally do to switch off from work they exist, but I just can't do them at the moment. So gym classes, the basketball, going to the college games and things like that. So not just the Flyers games, but the college games as well. That literally just stopped dead the weekend after, and a lot of my friendship groups are contained within that as well. So and that stopped straight away. So having spent last year really trying to address my balance of work and kind of social life, and having got to a place where I thought, okay, this is quite good now. I've got quite a good balance here. I'm working good hours, but also taking lots of time out. And actually, I was in the place where my calendar would start with the basketball, the college games, the men's games, games that I was helping out on the table, and then gym sessions, and then I would work in around that. So I'd actually got to that place where I was, the balance was really good, and then it just stopped. So for me, it's been that tough question of making use of the extra time in a positive way, but still switching off. And it's that hard balance of, okay, if I stop working now, what are my options? I can go for another walk, or I can do more housework. And that's just okay. That's wearing a little bit thin now. And when there's always something to do, when you're running a business, there's always something to do, isn't there? So it makes it much easier for the preferred option to be, well, I'll just do one more thing work-wise. So I've had to play around with that a little bit. I have done some extra hours, and I've worked on putting some extra sort of products together. The Thrive program is running at the moment, so I've got an amazing group on there at the moment. So that gives me some good sort of interaction with groups of people, which has been quite nice. But as things have started to ease a little bit, I saw my mum and stepdad today, and I've seen my sister and her children a couple of times, although smaller people struggle with the distancing a little bit more, but it's been nice to see them, and I've caught up with friends and done some really nice walks with friends. That's been nice to do as well, so that's something I would really like to keep up, the walks and meeting up with friends for walks rather than perhaps some of the things you would normally do. So it's just that balance, isn't it, of making good use of lockdown. When years to come, when the grandchildren go, Grandma, what did you do in lockdown? I don't want to say that I worked 24/7, but I also don't want to tell them that I, put the Hoover around a lot either. So it's finding that balance of how did you manage that? And obviously I haven't had to homeschool because Nassim's fully grown. He's logged into his college sessions, but that's now finished. So he's gone off, he's been working. So there hasn't been any particular demands on my time as such. But lots of people have needed extra support through this. So, there's a little bit of awareness of, you know, I can sit and read. I've, you know, read. That's been nice, and I think I've nearly completed Netflix. Is there a balance for that?
It should be. You should get an award or something.
Yeah, I'm now on Amazon Prime because I'm running out of things on Netflix. But you know, at the same time, there has to be that balance of actually there's a lot of people who need support at the moment, and so I'm making myself available to people who want to book in calls and have chats. But if nobody books anything in, then I'll sit with the Kindle, or I'll sit and watch something instead. So I think being available, but also making use of the time if it's not being used. So it's
how easy is it to kind of show? Is it not? That's the best way of wording this. Has it been more difficult to show compassion ongoing? I mean, not just you, but generally, because I think increasingly people have started to maybe act from a position of fear. Maybe that kind of, and it leads nicely onto the fourth question I'll ask in a second. But it just seems to be that there was a real groundswell of compassion. It's been replaced by obviously some big world challenges, big world issues going on. And it just seems to have flicked a switch. It's gone a little bit weird. And you mentioned, I mean, the reason why I'm doing it through here is because I'm not on Facebook anymore. And things like social media was one of the things for me that actually really heightened my awareness of just what was good for me and what wasn't good for me. But have you found that with other people as well, that actually it's increased maybe sensitivity to certain things, or maybe people are just scared, I guess?
I think there's a lot of fear there. I don't know that it's necessarily the fear of the virus itself. I think it's more around the fear of the change or fear of loss of control. For a lot of people, it's the fact that this, you know, sadly, you only got to look at the statistics to know that this virus has impacted a huge number of people on a very personal level. However, in addition to that, it's also impacted every single person in a day-to-day level, because it's changed the way that we live and it's changed things that we've been allowed to do. So I haven't sensed a fear from anyone around the virus itself. It's almost like there's a bit of a distance in how real it is. We know it's real, but on a day-to-day basis, we can almost pretend that it isn't, for a lot of people, not everybody. But the fear of the unknown and the fear of change and the fear of having decisions made for us of what we can do, how we can do it, when we can do it. I think that is the little bit, I think that's what I'm seeing. And also now, you know, I think when we were in the full lockdown and everybody had to abide by the same rules, it was a lot easier because we were all in the same position. So from a human needs point of view, we were all on the same page. We were all experiencing the same thing, albeit in different ways. Now things are easing and we're allowed to do some things, but not all things. I think that's where you start to see the frustration from people of, well, that doesn't make sense to me. If you can do that, why can't I do this? You know, if you can go and get your beard trimmed, why can't I get my eyebrows done? They're not any further away. They're not any closer together. You know, if you can go and get your hair cut, why can't you go to or if you can go to the pub, why can't I go to the gym? You know, there's that very much what's important to people. You see people seeing that some people are being allowed to do what's important to them and other people are not. And so I think then there's that frustration of, okay, that doesn't seem fair. You hear that, I'm hearing that a lot, you know, that's not fair. You can do that, but I can't do this. You know, there's teachers who have to go into schools and teach groups of children but can't go and see their parents. You know, there's this disparity of it doesn't feel like a very equal playing field for people. And so I think that's when people's frustrations come in, because there's things in life that are important to us, but they're very individual things. Like, you know, for a lot of my circle, you know, we want basketball to come back. We want to be able to go and watch basketball games. I'm definitely not sitting here wanting to go back to a Ravers game, but I know that you probably are. You and others probably are. You know, it's just that, you know, there are things that are important to us. You know, I know that, you know, some people want to go back to the gym and other people couldn't wait to get into the pub. So I think it's just, they're very individual things that we enjoy that stopped. And while it stopped for everybody, we were all in the same place. But now it's just that it's not inequality, because that's not the right word, but it's that this doesn't feel fair of why can you do this and I can't. And eventually that will all, I think, move forward. It's just that interim period, isn't it, of while they work out what that looks like.
Yeah, it's all gone a little bit weird, and I think there's an element of kind of maybe mass conditioning as well. So today was the first time that I've been out, because of being shielded and stuff, and today was the first one out, mask and everything. It was so weird just to see that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I had to take Tula to my little dog, as you know, my little Shih Tzu. She was getting like a massive kind of like full on afro going on, so I had to get her cut properly. So I took her to the thing, but it was the first time I've been out like in public for months, and I think that constantly going through my head was that stay home, save lives. It's still there, that conditioning. So actually, it created quite a lot of anxiety going back out and thinking like, oh God, kind of thing. Even to the extent of like, what's your name? I haven't spoken to no one. So it's just really strange that you kind of, but I think that could be, I think the biggest challenge potentially is coming away from this. It's not so much going into it, it's coming away from this, isn't it?
I think people working out what's next and moving forward, I think is going to be a bigger challenge than the lockdown. The lockdown was very clear and the decision was made for us. You know, there were very, you know, it was, well, okay, when I say very clear, but, you know, it was eventually, the decision was made for us. You know, you can't, unless you are this, and this, you stay at home. And so it was, I think the decision was made on this day. This is now what's happening. You know, and I think that's now moving forward. It's almost like people are there are still some decisions being made for us, but there's also a lot of grey areas where people are being told to use your judgment and make the right decision for you. And I think that's the difficult thing there, is that everybody is going to make their own judgment and make their own decisions. And so because we're all individuals and we all have different experiences and we make decisions based on different things, that is going to be different. And so I think there's some things that are in our control, some things that are not. And I think moving forward, because we don't know what the timeline is and what's going to change and when, I think this is going to be more of a challenge for people than the actual lockdown, because the lockdown was like, okay, it's happened. This is what we're in. It is what it is. Let's just work out how to deal with it. Whereas now it's like, okay, it is what it is. Yeah, but what is it? What is it exactly? Like, nobody seems, you know, there's, and it changes week by week. So there's no, you know, it's, I know you heard you use the snow globe analogy yesterday, but, you know, it is that snow globe. You know, we you know, on a Monday, it's like, okay, today is the 13th. On the 13th, we can do X, Y, and Z. And then we get to sort of Wednesday or Thursday, and, you know, this was happening at the beginning. Boris comes out to his platform and gives it a good shake, and everyone's like, what are we doing now? And I think we're back there again. Whereas I think
so.
We all had those stay home, save lives, easy peasy. Unless you are out there saving lives, stay home. So it was very simple, and now not so simple, not quite so clear cut. And when people make decisions, people sit back and they judge decisions that people are. It's what humans do. We decide whether or not we think they've made a good decision, and we say what decision we would have made, and quite often they're two very different things. So yeah, I think the next couple of months, and you've got businesses making decisions, you've got government making decisions, you've got organizations making decisions, and then we have to make our own personal decisions in our own family homes of what we need to do. So there's lots to work out.
That there is, and like I said, there's no, I mean, before, if you take self-employment, for example, you think, right, actually, I'm done with this, I'm going to go get a job. Actually, that potentially might not be an option right now. And vice versa. People may find themselves in employment and fallen into self-employment. It's going to be, and I think that's the problem. We're all, in different ways, we're all bigger picture thinkers. But when we haven't got the bigger picture, we kind of get forced into this Groundhog Day mentality. which actually to some is okay and not so much for others. But I know with the work that you do, with the work that I do, the next time that we're in a non-socially distanced environment, speaking or training, who knows? I mean, the statement today from one of the World Health Organizations was a minimum a year. So it's crazy that actually that we. I think you have always been a step ahead of the game because you've always put a lot of focus onto your online products to reach more people. And I was catching up on my endless emails today, and from last week, because you miss a week, you get 3 weeks worth of emails for some reason. And I saw your corporate wellbeing offers, and they're amazing. And that's an amazing kind of offering. So again, it has produced the time to do something like that for your business. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think, you know, the word, when you use the word compassionate, I think I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anybody who said that they are not a compassionate person. We all like to think that we are compassionate, but ultimately that self-preservation and self-protection takes over, and we will put ourselves first. And it doesn't mean we want to put other people second, but ultimately we will put ourselves first. And that, you know, when this first happened from a self-employment perspective, I know I was like head down, right, what is happening for me and my family and for the business. And then I kind of came up out of that a week later, had some conversations with other people in self-employment, having been in this little bit of a bubble of, okay, what am I doing? How do I get through the next 3 months, which is what we were, you know, told it was possibly going to be. And then I came out of that a week later and had conversations. And while I'd been in this bubble working out how to protect me and mine, their whole businesses had just been kind of deleted overnight. So, you know, that I don't think anybody wants to, nobody is, you know, again, it's that nobody wants to describe themselves as not being compassionate, but sometimes we're very inwardly compassionate first, and then we kind of look
absolutely
outward.
Like I said, there's no playbook, is there, really? Because I know that a lot of people, when they're feeling that, will take a step back. They will actually put that distance. See, my problem, I think maybe you kind of given my obsessive compulsive roots, is my reaction is to go extra at something, which leads me such nicely onto the fourth, if I've lined it up, the fourth question. So I think that's kind of led me to, I think over lockdown, that if you look at the 14, 15, 16 weeks, whatever it's been, actually, if you look back at my previous kind of videos and stuff, for the first 10 weeks, I was saying I was loving life. This is pretty good because it's my old anxiety mechanism. But the longer it's gone on, I've really been struggling with like, you'll always get honesty from me, you know that. You'll always kind of, I've struggled with the long-term effects of lockdown, but also its perception on what is normal. Everyone's going on about like creating the new normal, but for me, because I throw myself at stuff, so I'll go like hyper or hypersensitive, or I'll get very obsessive about stuff. I kind of end up with that three bear syndrome. I either do way too much, or not enough, but rarely actually getting it right. And I think that's the reason why things like last week when I took some time back, so I've just started to feel that kind of burnout kind of thing going on. But also I speak to other people who just feel a little bit lost, maybe a little bit aimless, have lost a bit of focus. As an amazing coach that you are, what would be your advice to help them press the reset button? What would you say to those people that come to you that are feeling those things? What could they do right now to start to press that reset button and to start to regain some control over normality? I can't think of another word to describe it. I don't like normal, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've been, you know, I've used the phrase "your new normal" for a long time, because for me and the work, you know, the work that I do with people is quite often creating a new normal for them. And so quite often when people start talking about, oh, well, I went on holiday or I had a break, I can't wait to get back to my normal on Monday, that to me tells me that the changes that they've made are fully embedded, and that is now their new normal. So I've been using that for a long time, and that's like everybody's using it. But I think what you're talking about is, you know, people, it's that fight for control, and so people tend to swing from, you know, if you think of it a bit like a seesaw, it's like they will run down one end of it to try and regain as much control as possible. It flips, it tilts, it's way too much. And then they end up running right the way back down the other end of just going, well, okay, that didn't work, so I'm just going to back off of it completely. And literally, so then the seesaw is forever, from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think finding that kind of nice balance where we're just kind of, nobody's getting bumps off the floor, but just kind of that nice balance of both, doing a little bit more, a little bit less, is quite a hard balance for a lot of people to find. Most people go full on, back off, recharge, full on, back off, recharge, and that's just how life is for them.
Sorry for this time, by the way, but you literally just explained me completely. That's absolutely nailed it completely. That seesaw, I'm having that. I'm using that.
You can have that one, but yeah. Now I've got visions of you getting bumped up and down. But that's how it is for. I think that's how it is for a lot of people. When we do something that works, we go back and we try and repeat it, and then quite often we try and repeat it in lots of different scenarios because it's worked for us before. It's kind of how we tick. So I think there's a lot of people at the moment trying to apply old behaviors to what's happening at the moment because it worked for them before and they can't understand why it's not working now. And so sometimes it's just about taking that step back and going, what do I want? What do I want to keep? What do I want to leave behind? What do I want to see in my future? And really, people should be doing this all of the time. People, we shouldn't need this huge kind of shake-up of the world to spend some time reflecting on what our life looks like, what's good, what's not good. Now, I know that I do that on the 7th of July every year. Take that step back and go, okay, what does my life look like? What's good in my life? What do I want more of? What's not working so well that I need to adjust? What do I want to do differently? What have I achieved in the last 12 months? What do I still want to work on? What do I want the next 12 months to look like? And so I do that every year for personal reasons, but a lot of people don't do that. I think New Year's, maybe people take a bit of a step back and a bit of a reflection, but this is a real opportunity for people to go, okay, what do I really, really miss from before that I haven't been able to have now? So I know that goes in the mixing pot for the future. What have I not been able to do, but actually I haven't really missed? And what do I want that to look like? Do I just want to leave it behind completely, or do I want to replace it with something else to move forward with? But also, what opportunities has lockdown given me? What have I tried that's been different that I want to keep and put that in the pot as well? So I think this is a great time for reflection. I kind of feel it needs to be done now before things start gaining some momentum and things start to move forward and things start to change. Okay, what do you want it to look like? Now, some of that will be in our control now. Some of it won't come into our control until later on. Focus on what's in your control now. But if, there will be some things at the moment that you're trying to fix with old habits, old behaviors that aren't going to fix this. You're going to have to go back into the toolbox and find something different to apply to it to see what works to move forward. Does that make sense?
So much sense. Literally so much sense. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. I think it's a real powerful question, because actually, I mean, even as a non-solution bringer, I get asked that a lot at the moment from people. So whether that be audiences, the people I'm doing virtual talks to and stuff, that's a big thing at the minute. Actually, it's taken away a lot of direction from people. And actually, the way that you explain that about trying to conquer new problems with old solutions, that makes complete sense. So yeah, hey, you're good, aren't you?
Yeah. I have my moments.
Yeah. So final question. This is kind of like the real, because obviously you've got an elite audience. This is like the clean version of Snog, Marry and Avoid. So you've got to choose 3 people So
okay.
one to go on holiday with.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking 2-week cruise, because that's kind of like contained. One to have a night out with, night out of your choice.
No,
And one to discuss the meaning of life
night
with.
out, okay.
So one to go on holiday with, one for a night out, and one to discuss the meaning of life with. Who would these people be, dead or alive?
Okay. From anywhere.
From anywhere.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Holiday with. Ooh, okay. So I've tried going on holiday with other people. I don't like it much. I think you get into your own ways, don't you? You get into the things that you really enjoy doing, and you kind of fitting that in with somebody else is quite hard. The only person who I've gone on holiday with, and we've kind of is my son. You know, that we kind of have very similar interests, but also the bit of like, all right, I'm going to go and do this, you go and do that, and we'll meet up at this time at this space, with no kind of argument about it. I am yet to find an adult that I am able to do that with. So there's a vacancy open there.
Nice. Okay, put it out there.
Okay, so that would be holiday. Because actually, I think of some people to go on a cruise, someone's going overboard. Someone would end up going overboard.
So we've got Naz for the holiday.
That would be the.
What about your night out?
Naz for the holiday. Night out. Okay. So Idris Elba has been avoiding my calls for a little while now. So he needs to get on board with the night out. Yeah, he needs to get on board. Or do I want to work out the meaning of life with him, though? That's the question.
Choices.
My honest answer for the meaning of life, I think that's a tough one, because actually I think we need to be on our own to do that.
Nice.
I think people can influence it, and I think people can ask really good questions. However, if you're truly going to work out what it means to you, I think you need to be on your own to do that. I think we get very reliant on other people to try and help and guide us. But when you sit down and have those conversations with people who you know, it's very hard to do that in an objective way and not to influence it. I guess that's probably coaching me to a point of, if I wanted somebody to help me work out the meaning of my life, it would need to be a coaching relationship, not somebody who I can influence or try or shape it based on their experiences. So I think, again, that's the kind of the beauty of a coaching relationship, is not trying to influence it or not trying to shape it, but just to help the individual get that clarity and work it out for themselves. So
that also frees up Idris Elba for the night out.
Yeah. And if he wants to hang around and help me work out the meaning of life for a little bit as well, I'm open to that. I'm an accommodating person.
Well, thank you very much for answering my questions.
I think Mrs. Elba might have something to say about that.
That's true. Yeah. No, great. Thank you for answering my questions. It's been great chatting to you.
Thanks for getting involved. I've really enjoyed that. They were good questions, and there's still people watching. There's no comments, although I've seen little emojis popping up every so often. So yeah, hopefully people have enjoyed tuning in and seeing what we had to chat about. But thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to throw some questions at me. Enjoyed that.
It's been fun. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it too.